Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride, and the reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. Thank you for watching. For me, today is April 1st. For you, probably the first showing will be April 7th, and this particular show will probably be shown the next 2 weeks after that. As a result, anything I talk about that is at all topical will be completely obsolete, and consequently, I have a tendency to talk about things that are obsolete up front. That way, things are only as irrelevant as they would otherwise be. Again, I'm my own engineer, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip around the world a little bit. I'm going to put it right here on Arizona. If I fall off the chair, because this is live to tape, you will see me fall off the chair on the 7th or the 14th or the 21st of April. So that's basically the bottom line here, and I'm going to begin talking about my subjects. The last couple shows, I've been talking about 2 basic issues, and they've both been domestic, oddly enough. Usually I would talk about Hugo Chavez and the threat of socialism and things like that, unrest in the Middle East and who knows what else. But lately I've been focused on America because I think some really negative things have been happening and a little bit of this being turned around. So there are 2 areas that I'm interested here. One is in Wisconsin over there. The other is over here in Arizona. Now, I've said many, many times that I'm a Republican, and I'm becoming more and more shaky about being a Republican, but I haven't switched parties yet. And the reason I'm shaky is because of what the Republican Party has turned into. There's always been a lot of factions. It's been a smaller tent than the Democrats, but a pretty big tent. And there's been moderates, strong America, weak America, Republicans, and they've all been brought together. However, things have changed. And the last 10 or 15, 20 years, the Republican Party has been slowly but surely being transformed into an ideological party. Not a party of trying to get things fixed, not a party of trying to balance the budget and keep America strong against our enemies overseas, but a party that has an ideology that is unshakable and that doesn't change just because facts change. So it's gone from becoming a practical party with a practical ideology of pro-American values to a negative ideological party. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, there's been changes in the media. The television and network news has been slowly but surely decaying as our main way of getting political news. And consequently, that has been reversed by talk radio, cable radio, and again, Fox News Network, and the blogosphere, Drudge Report, certain very, very extreme websites that are now the norm. So what was once on the fringe in the Republican Party has now become the norm. And a lot of that is driven by the Koch brothers. Now, who are they? There's a number of foundations that are basically the family foundations of very, very large oligarchs. One of them is the Koch brothers, and the Koch brothers run Georgia Pacific Paper and a series of oil pipelines throughout the country. Needless to say, if your business is power generation and your business is oil pipelines, you're completely dependent on the government granting you access, granting you right-of-way, and so on and so forth. Oddly enough, the family that owns this company the company was founded by member of the one of the founders of the Birch Society in the 1950s and 40s. A company that I believe goes back before that. He had developed a method of pumping oil over a pipeline, so he became a pipeline developer, and eventually bought power plants and bought Georgia Pacific, which is a owner of a lot of forest and lumber products and paper mill, especially. So a lot of their products you find on the shelves, and there are some people that are trying to boycott them. Among them are a whole bunch of almost all the toilet paper products that you see, like Quilted Northern and so on and so forth. Dixie Cups is owned by these people, and Brawny paper towels, among other things. So why are they so important? Now, there's a certain group of foundations that all have basically an anti-federal government theology. I won't even say ideology, because they believe this over and above and notwithstanding all of the evidence whatsoever. And among those is, of course, the biggest of the Koch brothers, Koch Industries. The second is the Olin Foundation. There's the Prince Foundation. So the Prince owns Blackwater, by the way, which ironically is a company that supplies security to the State Department. It's completely dependent on the federal budget. And all of these groups supported ideology to undermine and to reduce the power of the federal government, and basically to turn our country from a country of unified country which is a great power and the strongest military power in the world and the largest economy still in the world, to an agglomeration of 50 disunited states. And basically what they believe in is they believe that the supremacy clause of the Constitution, which says that the federal law and treaties made by the federal government is the supreme law of the land and overrules laws made by any one of the states, is been trumped by the 10th Amendment, which is powers not otherwise granted to the federal government are reserved for the states or the people. Ironically, obviously, if a law is federal, the rest of the Constitution, the part that says otherwise mentioned, says that the federal government has the power of supremacy, that the laws of the federal government are supreme over the laws of the various states. Then we have here in Arizona, and that's probably the worst offender, at least up to now, our Senate President Russell Pierce and various other people, Kavanaugh and some others, who really believe that the state law trumps federal law, that they tried to pass a law saying that the state can trump any federal law, and that the states and even local sheriffs can arrest federal law enforcement coming into their areas and prevent them from doing their jobs, mostly ATF, but also Border Patrol and so on and so forth, and that the states can create their own militias that are not, as required in the Constitution, able to, under the envelope of the presidency in a time of emergency, that can't be called up. So they've tried to pass all these different things. And the worst offenders, in my opinion, was trying to dump the 14th Amendment and to say that children born within the confines of the United States may not be citizens, and that Arizona can declare them not citizens of Arizona and therefore not citizens of the United States, deny them American citizenship by issuing them a bizarre birth certificate that says you were born here but you're not a citizen. Now, the 14th Amendment very, very clearly says that anyone born on the soil of the United States and under the jurisdiction thereof are U.S. citizens. And by what the founders meant, and this was actually, the founders are not the founders of America, because the 14th Amendment was passed by the radical Republicans in the wake of the Civil War, basically saying that states can't go in there and deny citizenship to the blacks who've been freed. But they also said and made it very, very clear in the discussions in the Senate that they can't deny citizenship to people born in the United States. That the criteria is not your race, is not your pedigree, but the criteria is the location of your birth. Now, there's some exception to that. Children born of American parents in military bases overseas or under SOFA agreements and so on and so forth. But basically, anybody who's not the son or daughter of a foreign diplomat is recognized as an American citizen. And this is what these folks wanted to change. And there were some very weird things about it, because 1070 said that anybody who has a Arizona driver's license is an unquestioned citizen, or at least a legal resident. And however, this particular law didn't say anything about that. Basically, our out-of-state mothers, were they required to have their birth certificate or their passport in their hands when they were in labor, having a baby on Arizona soil in order for that baby to be recognized as a citizen. This was brought up by one of the state senators, a Republican state senator, in the original committee that Mr. Pierce tried to push the law through. And he basically nixed it because he said this is just too vague. Not only is it against the Constitution as it's written, but on top of that, we are going to deny citizenship to people who have been citizens and their families have been citizens for generation after generation. And also, and my argument was that this is a bureaucratic method of determining who's a citizen, who can vote. Basically, bureaucrats will decide. They will review the paperwork of the mother, and if they reject the paperwork of the mother, no matter how long that family's been a citizen, whether that mother is a daughter of the American Revolution or a Mayflower descendant, if her paperwork is not in order, her child is in this limbo state. Another one of the crazy laws in what they call the Omnibus 1631 was a law that said that hospitals will deny hospital care outside of the emergency room care to anybody who does not prove that they are a legal resident or a citizen. Again, it was unclear from the wording whether the SB 1070 Arizona driver's license clause was in there. Even if it was, what happens if an out-of-stater goes to the hospital? Or even more so, what happens if a person who's too old to drive has to go to the hospital? Those were not stated in the law. There was no appeal. These people would have been thrown out and pushed out onto the side of the road. Now, a very, very interesting thing happened, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and that is the Republican coalition. How do Republicans win elections? Well, there's certain groups that the Republicans have been trying very, very hard to offend and keep out of their coalition. The first, even though they do get about 20 to 25% of their votes, are Hispanics, because they bash Hispanics all the time, especially here in Arizona. And the implication of 1070 is that if you were around while you were an Hispanic, you better have your driver's license in your pocket, because you could be arrested and held until you prove that you were a legal resident. any law applies to all the citizens, and that was in 1070, that there would be no race, color, or even language exception. But I think everybody, there's a wink and a nod, especially with Sheriff Arpaio, that Hispanics, that this was kind of aimed at them. So that's 25% of the population in Arizona. There's just been an article that Hispanics are now 50 million, about 1/6 of the population of the United States. And of that, at least 54 or 53 or 43 or 44 million are citizens. So this is a large block, and a block that is increasing in its voting. They have a much lower percentage of voters than the Caucasians, but they are voting in greater numbers every single election cycle, at least the presidential election cycles. So basically, that leaves in the Republican coalition the Caucasian working class, many of whom either were union members, and many of whom are firefighters, policemen, a lot of whom are vets, and so on and so forth. And if they're probably not union members now, but their parents and their grandparents possibly were. So you have a group over here that is very conservative socially, many Catholic, who are against abortion, and others who are like coal miners and so on and so forth, who are fundamentalist Protestants, and basically who've been voting Republican. And then you have another group who are the Protestant fundamentalists, and then you have another group that believe in this new, relatively new ideology, which is anti-government, anti-America as a unified state, pro-powerful state, very anti-immigrant, and so on and so forth. And then the last part is business, because let's face it, business has benefited. Receipts of corporate taxes has gone from $400 billion in the 1990s to 130 billion today. So they're not paying very many taxes. Payroll taxes capped at only 100,000, and these people make many, many times more, especially the CEOs and the leaders of business. So you have this Chamber of Commerce, CEO, executive group, who support the Republican Party because the Republican Party has been supporting them. But they're a little bit shaky about basically offending large portions of their own market. They realize that America is becoming multicultural, and that within a few years, maybe not majority, but at least 1/3 of the population of the United States are going to be non-Caucasians. So that's their market. They are selling to these people. They don't care. They don't want to be seen as supporting somebody who is anti-Hispanic or anti-anybody. They want to sell to everybody around. They don't care. They don't want to pay their people. They don't want large benefits to cost them and cost them their margins. They don't care whether they buy stuff and import it from China or import oil from the Middle East. However, they don't want to offend their constituents, which is everybody that buys anything. So basically, you have this group that's been getting more and more powerful in the Republican Party that has a bunch of these very, very powerful foundations behind it. And the Koch brothers, the Koch Industries and the Koch Brothers Foundation, they're behind a lot of other foundations, the Cato Institute, the Manhattan Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, and all these groups that say that unions are bad and that people make too much, average people make too much money, have too many benefits, and that taxes are too high. Taxes, especially on the wealthy, have to be reduced at all costs. But they also push this anti-immigrant ideology and this kind of anti-United States. Not just attacks that the government is inefficient, but that the government is a united government of the United States. The one that's made us a great power for this last 80 years is inherently stepping on their rights and making them pay taxes. So what we've seen here, the omnibus immigration bill in Arizona failed, and it failed because of Republican votes. I mean, the state Senate has only 8 Democrats and I believe 21 Republicans. So how could it possibly have failed? Well, it failed because Republicans turned on it. 7 to 10, depending on the bills. There were 5 bills, 2 birthright bills, the omnibus bill, and 2 other bills, all of whom were very extreme and basically said, all you citizens, you better keep your citizenship proof available, because we can deny you ability to go to the hospital, we can count your kids, we can basically especially businesses, we can take away business licenses from businesses that can't prove every single year that every single person they hire is a citizen. All these things basically were too much for the Chamber of Commerce's. 20 Chamber of Commerce's in Arizona and 60 CEOs of the major corporations in Arizona signed 2 letters, one from the Chambers of Commerce and one from the CEOs, that basically said, we are tired of it. We are not going to go down this route of having an anti-immigrant state. We don't want to be boycotted. We don't want to be singled out. We want you to stop with the state sovereignty agenda. And this is very, very important, especially here in Arizona, because this is a split in the Republican Party between the Chambers of Commerce, who raised at least $100 million in the 2010 cycle, and the Koch brothers and the Tea Party. Tea Party is basically funded by the Koch brothers, and these other foundations who have this state sovereignty agenda, which is basically big state government forcing people to produce their ID at any moment and at every moment, to have it on them, and to constantly prove that they're citizens, and at the same time to be against a united federal government, the very federal government that's fighting 2 wars overseas to protect our interest, and possibly a third in Libya as well. So you have this situation where now there's beginning to split. Now there's another split. And I've been talking about Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, the governor tried to force an anti-union bill that basically said that public worker unions would lose their right to collective bargaining in a union state. The Democrats left the state. There's a lot of giant demonstrations, up to 100,000 people over and over again. And finally, the Republicans still passed it in the middle of the night by having a conference on a bill that hadn't passed both houses in a legislature, something I've never heard of and nobody else has either. However, the very interesting thing about it is that they had excluded 2 groups who are public unions from the losing their collective bargaining, the police and the firefighters, who were basically Republican supporters in 2000, 2004, 2008, supported McCain and the Bushes over and over again. And now they are coming out against the governor of Wisconsin, but they're also joining together with other unions to oppose all Republicans, because they've decided that Republicans have decided to brand police, teachers, firefighters, all the heroes of 2000, of 9/11, 2001, as brutal people who were trying to force high taxes on the wealthy. So I believe the Republican group is starting to collapse a little bit. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your watching.